Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. This week has been marked by a significant development, the ongoing crisis in Gaza, after the UN Security Council passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. It's the first time in nearly 6 months of conflict that the US has not blocked such a vote. On this episode of Frankly Speaking, we're joined by UNICEF Spokesperson James Elder to delve into the implications of the ceasefire for Gaza. Can it effectively halt Israel's deadly assault? And what does it signify for the ongoing war? Plus, while Israel claims that plenty of aid is reaching those who need it, humanitarian agencies say children are dying of dehydration and famine. We'll seek clarity from Mr. Elder on what he's witnessed firsthand. And with more than 20 years working in the world's biggest crisis zones, does he think the international community has failed Gaza's youngest victims? Mr. Elder, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. Now, the UN Security Council finally passed a resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. This came after the US abstained after having vetoed the resolution before. Now, there's huge hope from the international community after this resolution. You say, however, that hope is being drowned out by the noise of the ongoing bombs. So, frankly speaking, with more than 30,000 killed in close to 6 months, most of them women and children, is Gaza, or what's left of it, beyond saving?
No, I have to defer to Palestinians who I speak to every day, Katie, who will explain, a mother telling me she's lost her children, some of her children, her home, her ability to feed those children who are alive, had to move multiple times. All she's got is hope. But yes, there was a profound sense of hope in the hours immediately after that Security Council resolution. And yet what we've seen since then, you could hear the drones or the planes, I'm not sure, what we've seen since then is more children, more innocent kids, time and again, who are victims of these bombardments. And by victims, I mean the burns and the shrapnel and the broken bones. So no, any Palestinian, any Gazan here is holding on to hope, holding on, pushing through every day, helping each other, breaking the last piece of bread for a family member or a neighbour. But they are literally just holding on, Katie, with so many odds against them.
And of course, you are someone who's worked for the United Nations for more than 20 years. You've been located in some of the most deadly conflicts anywhere in the world. Now, you've recently travelled the full length of Gaza and you've described the scenes of what you've seen as utter annihilation. You've said nothing is left behind of cities that were once thriving and busy. So take us through some of the day-to-day realities on the ground. Tell us about some of the scenes that you've witnessed firsthand.
Yeah, where you refer to there was Khan Yunis, the neighbouring city to where I am now. I spent a lot of time in there in November, December, met a lot of people, spent a lot of time at the hospital, NASA hospital, a lot of time with incredible health workers doing 24, 36-hour shifts in a war zone. And as they would say to me as well, they were doing the work that they knew they loved to do and they were born to do, as that some had said, but they were terrified because their families were outside. So I knew that area well, and I went through it now and just annihilated street after street, rubble everywhere. I have not seen that level of devastation, which in my mind segued to here, to Rafah, and why we cannot see that happen here. But yes, those scenes. So Khan Yunis is now, it's like it doesn't exist. Gaza City still somehow the same, just cracked rubble and steel as far as you can see, and stunned looking people because home after home have been destroyed. And then in Rafah, it's a city of tents. It's a city of children. This is where families were meant to go to stay safe. And there's a desperation here, but there is a solidarity. People do what they can for each other. And then, Katie, as you say, I've been across the Gaza Strip in the north, is a level of suffering that I can't say defies words, but it is getting to a point where we're seeing children die of malnutrition, of dehydration. You see parents in tears over a child's cot, a child who is paper thin. This is a mother who's done everything she can to protect her child from these relentless, I'm sorry, I get distracted because the air is busy tonight, relentless bombardments. And now she's trying to protect her child from starvation. And these mothers and fathers are learning that the real decisions about the safety of their children are being made by people elsewhere. So there is a level of stress and anxiety across the Gaza Strip. And that probably also, Katie, speaks to the mental trauma here of more than 1 million children. And as a child psychologist said to me, we are in uncharted territory here when it comes to the mental health of girls and boys in Gaza.
And I think you raised such an important point there, because in any conflict, fatalities are devastating. But typically when it comes to children caught in conflict zones, we see a fatality level at about 20%. It's double that where you are, isn't it? About 40%. And it's absolutely horrifying. You mentioned there about families protecting their children from the bombs, now watching their babies die in their arms due to lack of food and water. I know you said we're seeing severe malnutrition cases, children on the brink of death, skin and bones. And of course, these are the ones who've managed to get to hospital. There's a very big fear about those who haven't. So tell me, what is the situation like now? You're located in Rafah, as you told us. What do you need most in order to save as many children as possible?
Yeah, what a great question. A ceasefire. We need the ceasefire decision, the Security Council, to be substantive and not symbolic, because a ceasefire, Katie, does three things. One, it allows the United Nations to flood the Gaza Strip with humanitarian aid, and we can turn this imminent famine around. The second one, of course, is get the hostages home. There are children here somewhere underground or whatever horrendous torment they are enduring. End the torment, get hostages home. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the idea of a mother and a child night after night lying in bed, not knowing for very good reason if they're going to wake up in the morning, not knowing if they're going to wake up from rubble, not knowing, as the family I saw a number of days ago, a mother lost a leg from a bombardment and her husband lost 2 limbs from the bombardment, and their child was critically injured next to them. A ceasefire means families, a mother and a child, can go to bed with absolute certainty that they will wake up. They haven't had that for many months.
Well, the stories coming out are absolutely shocking. And of course, there's big concerns about a lack of access to aid there as well. Now, aid officials have told Arab News in recent weeks that sending aid into Gaza by sea or airdrops is simply not as effective as supplies by road and trucks. We've heard some horrific stories recently, people drowning as they tried to access aid packages brought in by sea. There were others killed in stampedes trying to access aid. Several weeks ago, people were shot at during an aid delivery too. Now, the UN has called this a man-made famine. So do you think the issue is that Israel is not providing enough access and security for aid deliveries coming in via land as somewhat of a pressure tactic in negotiations with Hamas? Or is it meting out the collective punishment for the October 7 Hamas-led attack?
Look, I can't speak to intent. I can speak to the reality on the ground. And as you rightly point out, we are not getting nearly enough aid in. When I came through the Rafah border, there are hundreds of trucks blocked there with life-saving aid on the wrong side of the border. When I was in the north of the Gaza Strip, and you are seeing people who are, hanging on to life, children and families who urgently need food, there are crossings there that could be opened, old crossings, where you would have aid within 10 or 15 minutes. Yes, it's good to see a ship. Any aid is useful aid, but the ship had the equivalent of around 12 trucks. There's 50 times 12 trucks on the other side of the border. Airdrops are usually used, Katie, when people are massively cut off from humanitarian assistance, a flood or a natural disaster. Here, they're not cut off. There's a road network. Road is the efficient, effective way. Roads are what will turn around this humanitarian catastrophe with a ceasefire. And as you rightly point out, though, Katie, it's the roads, yes, but it remains a very insecure place to work. It's potentially the most dangerous place on the planet. people have been killed receiving aid workers, more of my United Nations colleagues killed in this war than in any time since the advent of the United Nations. This is the reality that people are dealing with now. The UN does work in very dangerous places. That's what we do. Afghanistan, Sudan, Ukraine, here in Gaza. But we need to be very clear. International humanitarian law is unequivocal. Israel has a legal obligation to facilitate aid, not just getting in, but then to ensure it is safely distributed to those most in need.
You say we could see a real reversal of a lot of the problems surrounding the malnutrition cases in mere days if aid was properly allowed in, if a ceasefire was actually carried out. Now, we know Israel has been accused by humanitarian groups of consistently and groundlessly blocking aid into Gaza. Now, Israel, well, they claim that the bottlenecks to the entry of aid into Gaza by road have been due to the inability of UN agencies to be able to meet the needs of 2 million people. They say Hamas is also stealing aid that's meant for civilians and giving it to its fighters. Now, you're there every day delivering aid. Tell me, is that accurate? What have you seen?
In terms of aid distribution, in terms of the complexity of getting aid in, the picture I paint is very much obviously what I see. The restrictions, the arbitrary denials, the difficulties getting there, and they are solved in those ways I spoke to. Whether the idea that aid is being taken, for me it's impossible to say, because you can't tell the difference between civilians and others here. Of course, the way we distribute aid is you go to a health facility and you deal with a doctor. You go to a hospital and you deal with the director of that hospital. You go to a partner and you deal with a trusted partner that you've worked with for a long time. You drive straight into a hospital and you unpack it there. That's been the distribution formula for our life-saving nutritional support or obstetric care for pregnant women or vaccines. That's been the way that we continue to deliver aid. So I think there's a great confidence that there is no doubt the majority of the aid, although it's not enough, it goes to children and families and civilians.
Now, of course, along with the World Food Programme, UNICEF has been one of the names of the potential aid agencies that could be brought in to be a possible replacement for UNRWA, given the huge funding crisis we've seen for UNRWA and given Israel's objection to letting it return to Gaza. Tell me, what are your thoughts on these kinds of reports?
Look, UNRWA is the backbone of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. UNRWA's got thousands and thousands of very brave workers, of teachers, of doctors, of pharmacists, of nurses, of you name it. Can't fit into that void. Other agencies can support, other agencies will support. Other agencies have other specialties, of course. UNICEF has deep specialties in child protection and nutrition and so forth. But in terms of the full manpower across the Gaza Strip, the people of Gaza need UNRWA. Now, again, when we talk about the situation in the north, it's important to note that 50% of food aid getting to those civilians in the north was delivered by UNRWA. That has now been blocked. That's fast-tracking catastrophe.
And of course, that is a new development just this week. UNRWA no longer allowed to deliver aid there to the north. But tell me, is UNICEF, whose staff have not been accused by Israel of complicity in the October 7 attack, is UNICEF in a position to assume a greater responsibility in Gaza? And secondly, tell me, what would UNICEF do in case Israel does suddenly accuse your staff of supporting terrorism?
I can't answer the second question. It's a hypothetical. I don't think it's on the cards. To the first, we have stepped in to support UNRWA. It is a UN family. All agencies support. We do shared missions, shared convoys. Staff work across with each other. But again, the size and scope and breadth of UNRWA's work cannot be replaced. We can step in to help in certain voids, but that's filling certain gaps. It's not filling the breadth of what Palestinians need right now more than ever from an agency like UNRWA.
Okay, well, let me ask, did UNICEF have a contingency plan for a humanitarian crisis of such proportions to occur in Gaza, given the repeated Israel-Hamas wars in Gaza after 2007, the growing geopolitical tensions in the region, as well as based on the agency's own information from the ground?
I think it's both, Katie. We have contingency plans always. UNICEF is a frontline organisation, so this is what we do, unfortunately. A lot of development work, but emergency work. So we are always planning for worst case scenarios. I'm not sure anyone planned for the scenarios that we see now, for the fastest decline into catastrophic food since the nutrition body announced its findings a week or so ago. The devastation of cities that continues unabated. I don't think anyone, if we look back to where we were 6 months ago, could have possibly predicted things would be this bad for children and families in Gaza.
And there's been a lot of anger from the humanitarian community as a whole. Particularly, we've seen this dishonesty from Israel. They had promised precision attacks in Gaza. Instead, they carried out indiscriminate bombing instead. But I have to wonder, even if Israel had kept its promise, would humanitarian agencies have been reassured? Because surely any kind of bombing is going to traumatize the children of Gaza. How do you reassure a terrified child whose sleep has been disrupted by a loud bomb if they're told not to worry, it was a precision attack?
Yes, look, the international humanitarian law is very clear on proportionalities and on what warring factions can do. We have seen so many breaches in this war, and for children, it seems to make no difference right now. Children don't understand whether international law is being abided by or not. Right now, all they are doing is facing the severity of something that no child ever should have to endure.
And of course, these young children are simply not able to access the aid that we've been talking about a little bit earlier. And I think it's important to remember that before the conflict began in October, Gaza relied on 500 aid trucks entering daily. Nowadays, we know around 1/4 of those trucks are being allowed through, just 126. So even once this stockpile of aid that's waiting at the Rafah border is allowed into Gaza, surely providing the food, the water, the medicine at this stage is going to fall short of meeting their urgent needs. And particularly when we consider the devastated healthcare and service infrastructure right across the Gaza Strip. How does UNICEF intend to operate swiftly and efficiently amidst what you've called utter annihilation, and of course in an environment that is absolutely rampant with disease?
Look, the ability to scale out, to get aid across an area is what UNICEF does. We are fortunate we have the world's largest humanitarian supply hub in Denmark. We airlift, we ship, we do everything. We have warehouses here in the region as well. So multiple warehouses, not just the world's largest in Denmark, consistently ready to bring in that aid. So if now there was a ceasefire and multiple entry points were opened up and restrictions were lessened in terms of getting aid in, there is no doubt we could turn around much of this humanitarian catastrophe, particularly the nutritional situation for the most vulnerable. Those vulnerable who are at risk of dying, the 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 right now in the north, 1 in 3 who suffer acute malnutrition. As quickly as that occurred, the kind of therapeutic pace, the magic food, this nutritional supplement that children have that UNICEF provides is a game changer, an absolute game changer. Now, as you rightly point out, things like disease, the devastation to the health system, to hospitals, to water systems, to sewage, this is going to take longer. And yet I talk to colleagues and we're bringing generators in now and repairing desalination plants. This is fundamental. You need to get safe water to people. So we are trying to rebuild in an active war zone. So if the war stopped, obviously that reconstruction would be greatly expedited.
Now, Mr. Elder, we mentioned the fact you've been located in some of the worst conflicts around the world, including in Ukraine as well. And certainly any conflict, any loss of human life is tragic, but there seems to be a real disparity in how the world has treated the conflicts in Ukraine and in Gaza. You've highlighted this in one of your Instagram videos back in December. You asked why the world has closed their eyes when it's come to the plight of people in Gaza. Now, clearly these conflicts are very different, but do you believe that the international community has deliberately downplayed or neglected the suffering of Gaza's children?
No. I can't speak to intent, and I don't even know if I would agree with that. I certainly feel in the last month or two that everyday people from Seattle to Sydney and, I don't know, Germany to Johannesburg, increasingly seeing the plight of Gazans, are increasingly frustrated and angry and dismayed by what is happening. Now, is that panning out to the right decisions being made by leaders? We are seeing a sea change, obviously, most clearly in that Security Council resolution. Again, that needs to take root here. So I think there's been a dramatic shift. But as you rightly say, the world opens its arms to Ukrainians. And in the first weeks here, there was a clear blind spot for what is happening to the children of Gaza. And maybe it's not just for the first weeks here. You know, the children of Gaza have been living in very difficult conditions for very many years. I think everyone needs to be clear on that. From UNICEF's position, of course, you know, as an impartial humanitarian actor, a child is a child. A child in Darfur to Ukraine to Afghanistan, you know, to Angola and to Gaza. Many of them are going through things, all of them, through no fault of their own, through poor leadership or through wars or whatever the case may be. And our role is to speak for each and every one of those. But yes, our role is also to lobby and leverage the international community for their attention, for their awareness, and for their funds so that we can reach those children with nutritional supplies and water and get those kids back into school.
And of course, you personally have called for people around the world to speak up, to have their voices heard. But do you think the international community could have spared the children of Gaza from witnessing and being a part of these unimaginable horrors? And what do you think the history books will say about this particular war?
I don't know, Katie. I honestly don't know. I don't know how, to what degree, what impact greater action will have right now. I know that there is a concerted effort by many, many people. You will hear the voices of the highest levels now. You'll have heard the European Commissioner. You hear the Secretary General from day one has been speaking about this. So I think those voices from those people at those very large bodies have been very, very clear. We have to now remember that this is not over, that the right decisions can still be game changers for those Palestinians, those Gazans who still are enduring this. This nightmare can still end.
Well, Mr. Elder, thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. We know that this conflict is not only deadly for tens of thousands of civilians, but also the deadliest conflict in history for aid workers like yourself. We've heard the bombs that have been going over your head while we've been doing this interview today. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing this important message, and keep up the good work there at UNICEF. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Katie.